Hey guys, I'm going to do a video real quick, this one for the next fight night coming up. This is the second time I'm shooting this video because I found out the audio messed up the first time. I had to scrap the first video, but at least I found out just recently, in between shooting the two videos, that Angela Hill versus Mackenzie Dern has been postponed. It'll be happening next weekend instead of this weekend, so I can mark one fight off of the 5 that I chose to cover, so now we've got just 4, so let's get right into it. Starting off with Tim Means against Alex Morono. Tim Means is coming off of 2 losses to Max Griffin and Kevin Holland. He's got deeply talented roots for wrestling, and I think we're going to see him look to take this fight to the ground. He calls himself the Dirty Bird because he does like to make his fights real dirty and grimy in terms of the wrestling and going to the ground and just really grind away at his opponents. I think he's going to have a little bit of a harder time doing that with Alex Morono, though. Alex Morono is very well-rounded. He does seem to kind of specialize in the grappling, and I think he'll have a slight stand-up advantage. Morono's coming off of a loss in his last fight to Santiago Ponzinibbio. Not a bad guy to lose to, but before that, winning fights over Matt Semmelsberger, David Zawada, Mickey Gall, and Cowboy Cerrone. And when you're not quite in the top 15 yet, those 4 names I just mentioned are pretty big wins in your career. And looking back at both of these guys' past losses, they really only lose to top-of-the-line competition. And that's no surprise for these two. Both of them are so good. I think Alex Morono is going to have the slight advantage on the feet and maybe a little bit in the grappling with the more technical jiu-jitsu. So for this fight, I'm going to be taking Alex Morono. Now we've got Daniel Rodriguez against Ian Garry. Ian Garry, as we've all seen if you've been watching Ian Garry, he's had 4 fights inside of the UFC. He's won all of them, 2 by decision, 2 by knockout. And he's been impressive so far. He did struggle a little bit against Gabe Green when Gabe took him to a decision, but aside from that, he's looked pretty well. And you may notice he's also, in a way, kind of being propped up in the same ways that like Sean O'Malley and Darren Till and Paddy Pimblett and Conor McGregor have been propped up, in the way that they've been given fights that they're supposed to win, but still getting big spots on big cards. And if you look, every single fight that Ian Garry has had has been on a pay-per-view. So this is the first time he's going to be on a fight night. I don't know if that's going to affect him. He's 11-0. He's got some decent knockout power, and he's definitely got heart. He's well-rounded. He can handle himself on the ground, but on the ground, I think, is where he's going to be at a disadvantage in this fight. He's going against Daniel Rodriguez, and Daniel Rodriguez has shown to be extremely well-rounded and really kind of a grinder type of fighter. He likes to make his fights a little sloppy, a little bit grimy. And I see him wanting to push Ian Garry up against the fence and really just grind away at him, like I said. And I think Daniel might even have a pretty good opportunity to get a finish in this fight. But coupled along with the advantage in grappling that Daniel's going to have, he's also shown to have a lot of power and a very good striker. So Ian Garry needs to be really careful on the feet, especially with the way he fights. It's a little bit detrimental to his safety whenever they're standing on the feet. We've seen him get clipped a couple of times with some pretty big shots. Nothing really crazy to really send him flying to the ground or anything like that, or stumbling all the way across the canvas, but he's definitely going to be at a disadvantage in this fight, in my opinion, especially along with the experience advantage that Daniel Rodriguez is going to come into this fight with. And for this one, I'm going to be taking Daniel Rodriguez. And now the co-main event, Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker. This one's going to be a good one. This is probably the one I'm most looking forward to. Starting with Anthony Smith. Anthony, first of all, he's got over 50 fights and he's only 34 years old, which is very impressive. 36-17 as a pro entirely. He did lose his last fight in the UFC to Magomed Ankalaev, which is a very big grappling threat to absolutely any man on the roster. And also in that last fight, he hurt his leg really bad, so recently he's really just been trying to recover that leg and get back in there. Before losing to Ankalaev, though, he did string together 3 wins over Jimmy Crute, Devin Clark, and Ryan Spann. So we're seeing Anthony Smith really start to get back on track other than that last fight. He's also very well-rounded. I think he's going to have the ground advantage here. And along with that, he's got a lot of power. I mean, when he first burst onto the scene in the UFC, he's knocking everybody out. Legends, upcomers, doesn't matter. And he even got the opportunity to fight John Jones. And while he did struggle heavily with John Jones, got dominated pretty much throughout the entire fight, he still went to a decision with John, and I think that shows toughness and heart. And also, he had the opportunity to become the champion against John Jones by a disqualification because John had landed an illegal knee while Anthony was down up against the fence, sitting down basically, because John was just controlling him, had him in whatever position he wanted, and he landed an illegal knee when he shouldn't have, and Anthony was asked by the referee, hey, do you want to stop this fight? That was an illegal knee. If you stop this fight right now, you'll be the champion. And he said, no, I don't want to win that belt like that. So Anthony earned a lot of respect from me, at least, and I think he deserves a lot of respect for that. Now, his opponent, Johnny Walker, is coming off of 2 wins over Paul Craig and Ion Cutelaba in his last 2 fights. Johnny's going to be 2 inches taller, along with a 6-inch reach advantage, and paired along with that, he's also got a very awkward and unpredictable fighting style. While it has kind of become a bit more tame simply because he needed to become a bit more tame in the stand-up, it still can be very awkward and unpredictable at times and just weird all around. The only losses he's taken inside of the UFC come from Corey Anderson, Nikita Krylov, Thiago Santos, and the current champ right now, Jamal Hill. Plus, Johnny's also got a lot of power in his hands as well. He's shown that he's got big knockout power. I mean, when he first burst onto the scene, just like Anthony Smith, he was knocking everybody out real quick. Now, the thing that worries me about Johnny Walker is every time it seems like he gets any momentum going, he gets a couple wins, he starts to talk really big about his future goals, which there's no problem with that, but it just seems to almost curse Johnny Walker at times. I mean, every time that he's gotten a win streak going, we've seen him start talking about, I'm going to be a double champ, I'm going to be a triple champ, and then he goes out and he loses his next fight. And I don't know if that's because he adds a lot of pressure on himself to go and live up to those goals. But after beating Paul Craig in his last fight, he did start to talk about being double champ and triple champ again. And really, a lot of people take it as him getting ahead of himself. Some people take it as a goal that he's setting. Either way, it just seems to almost curse him every single time that he talks about it. But that's not why I'm going to be picking against Johnny Walker in this one. It's also the ground disadvantage that I think he's going to be at. I think Anthony Smith is just too strong to not be on top most of the time that they're on the ground. And while Johnny may have a slight edge in the stand-up, I think Anthony has what it takes to hold his own in there. So for this fight, I'll be taking Anthony Smith. And now for the main event, Jairzinho Rozenstruik against Jailton Almeida. This one is going to be a coming out party for Jailton Almeida. That's how I'm seeing it. This is his first main event inside of the UFC. The guy has won his last 13 fights in a row, 4 of those inside of the UFC. He's got 7 knockouts and 11 submissions on his record, with an 18-2 record as a whole. And along with finishing every single one of his wins, he's never left the second round in any of his wins. There is one decision loss that he has, but aside from that, he's never gone past the second round. And also, he might be a heavyweight, but he's impressive in the way that he moves almost like a light heavyweight or a middleweight. And along with that, he's one of the more technical heavyweights that you'll find in the UFC. Plus, he has an extreme talent for snatching necks. He's going to be 1 inch taller, along with a 1 inch reach advantage. And he is coming into this with a little less UFC experience than Jairzinho is, but Jairzinho may be a threat, but I don't know if he can win this fight. Now, his opponent, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, is one of the bigger heavyweights who like to swing and bang. You're not really going to see him do anything extremely technical. Jairzinho has a lot of power in his hands. He's probably one of the top 5 biggest hitters in the heavyweight division right now. Coming off of a win over Chris Daukaus in his last fight, in a fight where a lot of people seemed to think that Daukaus would have a little bit of an edge because he's a little smaller than Jairzinho. He's not quite as big as normally heavyweights are, but a lot of people thought that Daukaus would be able to use his speed and agility to his advantage, but it really didn't work out. He knocked out Chris Daukaus in the first round, and that's probably where he's going to have the biggest threat that he can offer to Jailton Almeida on the feet with his hands. But Rozenstruik does seem to have a history of losing to the more technical heavyweights who can do it all, really. Outside of his loss to Francis Ngannou, who I would still consider a technical heavyweight, I'm just going to exclude him because the other guys are probably more technical than Francis is. But outside of Francis, he's only lost to Alexander Volkov, Curtis Blades, and Cyril Gane. And those are probably the 3 most technical, well-rounded heavyweights you'll find in the UFC. Guys who can do it all to a high level just seem to be able to have every advantage in the book over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and Jairzinho doesn't seem to be able to fight the way he normally likes to against those guys. And I think that Jailton Almeida is one of those kind of heavyweights. I think Jailton's going to be able to get a submission or a knockout in this fight. I don't see it going 25 minutes. We've seen Jairzinho get gassed before coming out of the first or second round before, especially when he chooses to swing for the fences looking for a knockout. And normally that's kind of the game plan for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And I just don't see it working out for him against Jailton Almeida. So for this fight, I will be taking Jailton Almeida. And to recap, I'll be taking Alex Morono, Daniel Rodriguez, Anthony Smith, and Jailton Almeida. And that's all I got for y'all. Hit like, subscribe, and all that.